So Billy Joe Saunders versus Chris Eubank Jr. is signed and sealed for November 29th. The fight is on. Yes. We all wanted this fight. It's happening. Now, a lot of people jumped the gun and started accusing Chris Eubank Jr. of being afraid and losing his nerve when he didn't show up to the press conference the other week. But as I explained in my video about that whole situation, it's not as simple as it seems on the surface. People need to understand who Frank Warren is, what he's done in the past, to then understand why Chris Eubank Jr. didn't sign the contract and turn up to the press conference. Frank Warren has previously, understand this people, he has previously announced fights that have not been signed. Yeah, Richard Schaefer called him out on that when he tried to do it with Chisora Wilder. He announced the fight and Wilder wasn't at the press conference. You know why he wasn't at the press conference? Because the fight hadn't been signed. Yet Warren announced the fight. Richard Schaefer was very upset with Frank Warren. He said, you don't do business like that. Warren did the same thing with Tyson Fury a while ago. And Mick Hennessy came out and said, you don't do business like that. And this recent incident, Eddie Hearn has come out and said, you don't do business like that. You don't just announce fights and start putting tickets on sale when there's no contract. And there are some, I mean, Frank Warren came out and said, well, it wasn't me that announced it. It was the EBU. I mean, give me a fucking break. The EBU put it up on their website. Why did the EBU put the fight up on their website? Because Frank Warren told the EBU that the fight was happening. The EBU putting something on their website is not a legally binding contract at all. It means nothing. Loads of fights go on the EBU website that don't happen. You need a fight to be signed before you start selling tickets. Otherwise, you're misleading people. Frank Warren is extremely unprofessional in this regard because he's got previous history of doing this crap. Trying to pressure fighters into signing contracts which they haven't, you know, necessarily had enough time to look at the contract and be happy with all the terms, be happy with the money, read the small print, go over it, you know, with their legal team. And as I said, Eubank Jr. was out of the country for several weeks. So he didn't have time to look at the contract and have his legal team sift through all the small print in time to sign by that 5 o'clock deadline the other week. And what happened to that 5 p.m. deadline, by the way? Because Frank Warren said, if you don't sign by this 5 p.m. deadline, we're moving on. Well, what happened to moving on? Like I said in my original video, the fight's still going to happen. I told you the fight was going to happen because Billy Joe Saunders, there's no guarantee he's going to get a world title shot anyway. And even if he did go through, you know, and fight for that vacant WBO middleweight title, he's not going to make as much money. And that fight is not going to rate as highly as Billy Joe Saunders versus Chris Eubank Jr. So that was always the fight that Frank Warren was going to make. He needs big fights. Why the hell would he stick Billy Joe Saunders in a world title fight, and you know, which he could potentially lose, and he's going to earn far less money and it's going to get far less ratings than putting him in there with Eubank Jr., a guy who fights on his TV network anyway. The fight was always going to happen because, like I say, it was nothing to do with Eubank Jr. being scared. It was to do with Frank Warren and his usual, typical fish eyes bullshit. Frank Warren always does this shit. You need to know his ways, people. The guy's always trying to pull a fast one. Putting tickets on sale for fights that are not signed? What? Blaming it on the EBU when he's the one that told the EBU the fight was taking place? What EBU put on their website is not a legally binding contract for a fight to happen, folks. Stop being so foolish and accepting that excuse. And like I say, I know Eddie Hearn is his rival, but Eddie Hearn came out in one of his IFL TV interviews this week, and he just broke down the whole situation and said, look, it's ridiculous. You don't announce fights and put tickets on sale and have posters printed for a fight that hasn't been signed. That's just unbelievably, you know, unprofessional, ridiculous, and very cynical, actually. It's unprofessional at best. But anyway, let me stop ranting and raving about Frank Warren and his foolishness. Let's get back to the actual fight itself. Can't wait for this one to happen. November 29th. It's going down. Who are you picking in the fight and why? Eubank Jr. is completely unproven, untested. Really has fought no one. Has fought a terrible level of competition. But he's talented. He's fast. Great combination puncher, improving punching power. Early on in his career, it seemed as though he really couldn't punch that hard, but now he's really developed it. Him and his dad apparently have been working on it. That's what they said. And he's managing to knock out these journeymen rather than stop them on their feet as he previously was. Now he's knocking them out cold. So it is what it is. Can he be the real deal? Can he beat Billy Joe Saunders? Billy Joe really should win the fight based on his experience level, both as an amateur and a professional. But sometimes talent trumps experience. Does Eubank Jr. Eubank Jr. is clearly talented, but is he talented enough to trump Billy Joe Saunders' experience? That's the question. That's the question I'm asking you guys. What do you think? Can't wait for this fight to go ahead. And November 29th can't come quick enough, man. Drop your comments below. Let me know how you feel about this one. This is Hatman. I'm out.